Hi, this is Matthias from mamoworld.com, and in this After Effects tutorial I want to show you an efficient and quick way to animate many layers at once. So imagine you would just keyframe this single move here, this one, two keyframes, here's this layer, and now you could apply this very quickly and repeatedly to many layers to come up with this end result here. Okay, and if you want exactly this move, then this is actually super fast with our tool Repeat Animation on Selected Layers, which is included in our tool Automation Blocks for After Effects, because all you then need to do is, let me actually get rid of those keyframes here, is you should make sure that every layer on which you want to apply this, these are in this case, these layers here, you have at least one keyframe. We click on the stopwatch to have this keyframe, and then you run this tool, and now it will populate the entire work area with keyframes by repeatedly applying this move. And as you can see here, it also applied an expression, and if you take a look at the end result, it looks like this, and these keyframes are actually implementing exactly this move here, and the expression makes sure that it loops, so whenever a layer leaves at the bottom of the screen, it reappears at the top a little bit later again. This is a very basic way of using this tool, and now I want to show you how you can customize it to use your own keyframes. So let's say you don't want to let those layers move down, but you want, say, let them animate to the side in a wave-like way, maybe like this. So let's see how this is done. We go back to our original composition and undo the apply we had before. And one thing I prepared here already is an extra layer, namely this black dot here. And I've got some position keyframes on this layer, as you can see here. Now let's say we want to use these keyframes with our tool. So what we need to do is we make sure we have the tool selected in Automation Blocks, and we go to the code of this tool. These here are just comments explaining how the tool is used, or here you can click to open the documentation for it, the website. And here is a part where we can actually customize our code. And in the first parameter, you choose the keyframes that you want to use. And here you choose the property to which those keyframes should be applied. So this means if we want to use these keyframes, we just select this property and click refresh. And now here the data of these keyframes is actually inserted. And now, while we still have the position here selected, we click refresh here, such that the tool now knows that it is applied to the position properties. So in other words, here the keyframes themselves are stored, and here now it's stored that those keys should be applied to the position property. Now we've got some more options. We have some repeat every 1 second. You can see that our keyframes here are exactly 2 seconds long. So if we want to paste them first here and then the next instance 2 seconds later, which is here, so we could do copy, Command C, paste, Command V, then we could paste them again, okay, and we could do the same again, here, paste again. We could do this manually, and then we would need to have it exactly 2 seconds and 1 frame, yeah, later. This has two issues, actually. The first thing is you can see, if you look at the animation here, at the end, it will jump again to the beginning, and what we actually want is we want this keyframes to continue from here. And this is one great benefit of this tool, that it will automatically make sure that this is happening. So it's not just basic copy and pasting the keyframes, but it's also offsetting them such that we've got a continuous animation that is not jumping from here to the start again. Let me undo these manual things. Keyframe pastes here. And so as I said before, we want this to repeat after 2 seconds. If you want the animation to have a pause in between, you could say 3 seconds. You can actually also enter here values like 50 frames, also if you prefer to sync in frames, but I just say here 2s for 2 seconds. Now, if you want this to always happen, yeah, this means after 2 seconds, after 4 seconds again, after 6 seconds, so every 2 seconds it will be pasted, you need to set the probability to 100%. This means do it always. Let's just check how this is looking like. We select here our layers and say run script, and you can see it's pasting it on all of those layers. Great, now you've got this animation here. Let me quickly undo this and try what's happening if we go back here to 75%. This means only in 75% of the cases do a paste, and otherwise just skip it. And this just creates a little bit more randomness. If we run the script again, then you can see that in between here you've got some gaps where some of the layers are actually pausing. Yeah, this is just, we use this for this Tetris move that you've seen at the very beginning. Not all layers move down all the time, but sometimes they pause. I think probably in this case it's not what we want. You can see now this one is pausing, now it's moving again, now it's pausing again, now it's moving again. Okay, it really depends what you want. In this case we want to go here for 100%, and let me undo this again. The last thing is work area only. Okay, otherwise for the entire length of the comp the keyframes are written. With work area only, they are only written for inside the work area. And here you've got an expression. If this is the expression that is also applied to all these properties, and this particular expression makes sure that when an object moves out of frame, if it moves out of frame on this side, it will reappear again on the other side. And if it moves outside of the comp here at the bottom, for example, it will reappear at the top. So it's kind of a looping behavior. You can right click here and say expand block to actually see the expressions code here, or modify it if you want. If you don't want to apply an expression at all, let me just right click and say collapse again. Then you could also just put this here in the garbage. Yeah, but I want to undo. I right click and undo to get it back here. So we want this looping expression. So here I skipped ahead in time and applied the tool again because I wanted to show you one more detail, and this is why this feels to have some depth. If you compare, for example, these two objects here, you can see they have the same keyframes, but one of them is actually faster than the other one. And the reason why this is the case, the reason or the trick how I achieved this, is that these layers are parented to different null objects. So you can see we have here a depth 1 parent null and a depth 2 parent null. And these first layers here are all parented to depth 1. And all these layers here are parented to depth 2. And all these layers are not parented at all. And if you now take a look at the scale of those layers, then this one is scaled at 133%, this one at 170%. And so this means that they move faster the higher the parent is scaled, obviously. So if we set all of this to 100%, you can see that all layers move in exactly the same speed, which is not looking so exciting. And in contrast to this, if we scale this one up, 180, and this one maybe 130 or so, then you've got movements with different speed, and all of this gives this more depth and looks more interesting. So just parent your layers to different parents and scale those differently such that some of them move faster and some of them move slower. And now the last thing I want to show you is how you could also change this script to apply keyframes on multiple properties. So let's say to this sample we also want to apply some scale keyframes. So I click here for 100%, or maybe we actually want to start with 50% only. Then we want to go to, let's say, 180%, and then we go back to 50% scale. So this one is now also scaling up and down while moving. And maybe also let us set the keyframe interpolation to auto Bezier here for the middle one. Okay, now this block just supports a single set of keyframes on a single property, but what we actually can do is to duplicate this entire block to say now our script should do whatever this block is doing 2 times. And first it's doing it here with the keyframes that we've already loaded, the position keys. And now we select the scale property and say in the second instance it should, I click here to the refresh icon, it should use my scale keyframes and it should apply those to the scale property. So I click here, refresh again. And now here I've got the keyframe data, and here's the information that these keys should be applied to the scale property. And this should also happen every 2 seconds with a maybe this also with a probability of 100%, or maybe for the fun of it, let's say the scaling up and down should only happen with a 50% likelihood. And for this one, we don't want a looping behavior. We don't want when the scale is getting too big to make it jump back to becoming very tiny or something. So I just delete here this expression. No expression applied to scale, please. Now let's see what happens if we again select all our layers here. And you actually don't need to select the properties, but only the layers themselves is good enough. It doesn't hurt to select properties, but anyway, it knows it will apply it to the position and the scale. And let's run this script really quick. And now if you take a look, you can see we have both keyframes on the position and on the scale, and our animation looks such that the layers scale up and down and move at the same time. Looks like I didn't select this one. Yes, on this one I don't have the position and scale keyframes inserted, but I think you get the idea. Okay, the cool thing about all of this is if you have certain animation patterns that you use frequently, you can just take this entire code here and use the Save As button to save this under a new custom name, and then all the data, including these keyframes and the properties to which they are applied, etc., these settings are stored in a separate tool, in a separate XML file, so to speak, that you can then access in your library here under your user library. So you can create your own custom tools here really quickly and save them for later use. Okay, that's it for this tool. Last remark maybe behind this one, because I've duplicated this block here. Behind this one here is the detailed code hiding of what this entire block is actually doing. So if you wonder what the repeat keyframes on selected layers block is doing, you can right click here and expand, and here you can see all the details of what it is actually doing if you want to dive deep. Last but not least, keep in mind that this is just one of many, many tools that come with automation blocks. And if you want to know more about what the other tools can do, I'm looking forward to see you in the next tutorial.